Why did the wild animal protect the lost boy instead of attacking him? It was a question that baffled everyone who heard the story, a mystery that defied logic and instincts. Deep in the heart of an ancient forest, where sunlight barely pierced through the thick canopy, a young boy named Oliver found himself lost, alone, and vulnerable to the perils of the wild. But what happened next left the world in awe. Oliver was just 7 years old when the nightmare began. A simple camping trip with his parents had turned into a horrifying ordeal when he wandered away from their campsite, chasing after a butterfly. Before he realized it, he was surrounded by towering trees, their gnarled roots like twisted fingers reaching out from the earth. The voices of his parents faded into distance, and then silence. Panic set in. He called out, his voice trembling with fear, but no one answered. The forest was alive with sounds he had never noticed before. The distant howl of a wolf, the rustling of unseen creatures, and the eerie hoots of owls watching him from the darkness. As night fell, the temperature dropped, and Oliver curled up beneath the thick roots of an old oak tree, shivering, tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face. Then he heard it, a low, guttural growl. His heart pounded as he turned to see a massive, shadowy figure emerging from the darkness. The glow of the moon revealed its form, muscular, powerful, with sharp, gleaming eyes locked onto him. A wolf, a beast of the wild, untamed and lethal. Oliver froze, too scared to even breathe. This was the end. But instead of pouncing, the wolf stopped a few feet away, sniffing the air cautiously. Its golden eyes studied the small, trembling boy, and then, to Oliver's astonishment, it lay down. The night passed and the wolf remained. It did not snarl or snap. It did not lunge or growl. It simply stayed. And when the cold winds blew, it crept closer, shielding Oliver with its thick fur. The following day, Oliver woke to find the wolf still by his side. Hunger gnawed at his stomach and thirst parched his throat. But before he could even move, the wolf stood and padded into the woods. Minutes later, it returned, dropping a freshly killed rabbit at Oliver's feet. Horror gripped the boy until he realized the wolf wasn't eating. It was offering the food to him. Terrified but desperate, Oliver hesitated before taking a bite. The wolf watched in silence, its massive body still and calm. And then, as if sensing his thirst, it led him to a stream where crystal clear water gushed over smooth pebbles. It stayed by his side, never leaving, never letting danger come near. Days passed, and Oliver learned to follow the wolf's lead. It guided him to the labyrinth of the wilderness, showing him which berries were safe to eat and which plants to avoid. At night, it stood guard, its ears perked for danger, its body always between him and the dark unknown. Oliver began to adapt to his new life. He learned to listen to the sounds of the forest, to differentiate between the rustling of a harmless deer and the silent approach of a predator. The wolf, whom he had started calling Shadow, never left his side. They became a team, moving through the wilderness as if they had been destined to find each other. One evening, as Oliver sat by a makeshift fire, something he had managed to start using flintstones he had found, Shadow suddenly perked up. His ears twitched and his body stiffened. Oliver followed his gaze into the darkness and saw the glowing eyes of another animal watching them from a distance. It was a bear, a massive grizzly, its heavy frame shifting through the trees, its nostrils flaring as it caught their scent. Oliver's breath caught in his throat. He had read stories about bear attacks, and he knew he had no chance of outrunning or fighting such a beast. But before he could react, Shadow stood between him and the bear, lowering his head, baring his teeth in a menacing snarl. The bear hesitated. It studied the wolf, weighing its chances. Then, in a blur of movement, Shadow lunged, teeth flashing. The bear reared back, roaring in anger before turning and disappearing into the darkness. Oliver was in shock. Shadow had just saved his life. Again, the days stretched into weeks, and Oliver's survival instinct sharpened. He built small traps for catching fish, fashioned a rudimentary shelter, and even carved symbols into tree trunks to mark where he had been. But despite his growing skills, he longed for home. Every night, he gazed at the stars, wondering if his parents were still searching for him. What Oliver didn't know was that the world was already searching for him. Helicopters roared overhead. Rescue teams scoured the forest. and his distraught parents never stopped calling his name. But the forest was vast and unforgiving, and days turned into weeks with no sign of the lost child. Then, something incredible happened. One evening, as Oliver sat beside his guardian, staring up at the sky, the wolf suddenly stiffened. Its ears twitched, its nose lifted to the wind. A sound distant but familiar. Human voices. Oliver's heart leaped. He jumped to his feet, screaming at the top of his lungs. The wolf, startled, took a step back but did not run. And then the distant voices grew louder, closer. Flashlights flickered through the trees, and suddenly they were there. Search teams, rescuers, his parents. Tears flooded Oliver's eyes as he stumbled toward them, sobbing. But as he turned to point at the wolf, to show them the creature that had saved his life, he saw only empty space. The wolf was gone. In the days that followed, Oliver's story spread like wildfire. Scientists, journalists, and animal experts all debated the same question. Why had the wolf protected him? Was it compassion, instinct, or something beyond human understanding? Oliver, now safe in his home, never stopped thinking about the wolf. And sometimes late at night, he would swear he could still hear the distant howl of a guardian of the wild, echoing through the trees, watching over him, always there. And so, the legend of the lost boy and protected wolf lived on, a tale of mystery, survival, and a bond that defied nature itself.